Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. And welcome to episode 137, my Starter Scholarly Book Library. I had an opportunity to advise a new faculty member at another institution about what scholarly writing books or writing support tools I would recommend buying if I was a new professor. And the reason that she asked me this was that her institution, which I thought was amazing, I wish more institutions would do this, but her institution offered her $300 where she was allowed to buy whatever scholarly books she needed, whatever scholarly support tools she needed that were just general support. So this was not money for her research agenda or lab equipment or anything like that. So she was essentially allowed to find some professional development resources that would help her with scholarly reading and writing, and she could pick whatever she wanted. And so she happened to reach out to me to ask what books I might recommend because she had heard a few of them on my podcast episodes. But what we just kind of figured out is how we could make the best use of her $300 and 300 US dollars. And I thought I would share that with you today on this episode about the books. If I had around that amount of money, what I would be putting my money towards. So I do have slides with this episode, but if you're audio only, I'll tell you the titles of the books, some of which you've heard before and some of which you haven't, but you can also check us out on YouTube and you can see the slides and the covers of the books there. Also, our show notes will have all the links to these books if you're interested. So one of the things that got me thinking about this more after that conversation was that many of us will come across a scholarly writing book or a scholarly support book. We've all heard them, like Paul Silva's How to Write a Lot or Wendy Belcher's Writing Your Journal article in 12 weeks. And surprisingly, there's a lot of them, but there's not a lot of them out there. There's some that are certainly very specific. So if you're a law student, if you're in medicine, there's some that are specific by genre. And then there's a handful of kind of old standbys that people rely on, as well as just some new Kindle guides that don't seem to be getting a lot of traction. So I really looked to see if I could do it all over again. And I had $300. What do I know now? Which are the books that I've turned to again and again as a scholarly writer? Of course, I'm interested in faculty writing productivity. That's my research area. But even so, these are the same books that I'm still looking at now when I need to solve a writing problem. So for me, I really want ones that I'm going to get a lot of mileage out in the long term. So while there are some books that are fantastic for a first-year faculty member or a dissertation writer, what I'm looking at here are ones that will be great for the long game, meaning I might need them once for an article, but then 3 years later for a book. So these were the ones that I came up with. One I've mentioned at least on one of our holiday episodes for holiday gift giving is one by Susan Robeson called The Peak Performing Professor, A Practical Guide to Productivity and Happiness. And this book is the only one I've seen of its kind that really looks at scholarly writing in relation to the rest of your academic life. And it looks at it through a couple of lenses. So it looks at scholarly writing and publication in relationship to time management, in relationship to teaching. How do you think about all of your academic tasks and give the appropriate amount of attention to the things that need to have attention, particularly if you're on a tenure track line or a non-tenure track line where you get promoted regularly. This is the first book that I've really seen that kind of covers it all in one space. It's not the only one. There are a couple other books that I really like about being happy as a professor. I've recommended a couple of those. But this is one that actually, it's got some things in there that are very much like a workbook where you could work through various aspects of your career. And I like it that it addresses your career on multiple levels. So while it's great for a starting professor, you could easily use this at mid-career. And that's when I encountered this book. So that would be, it would definitely be one of my more, I guess if I only could pick a few, or if I only had $50 or something like that, I might pick something like this. Peak Performing Professor. This one, if you do get it, I would advise getting it new only because it has workbook pages in it, or get one that's used but doesn't have it written in, because you may want to use those. Another one that I like that I've recommended on a previous episode is a book called 90 Days, 90 Ways. This is by Patricia Goodson. She's got lots of books on faculty writing. I think this is her third one maybe that she's put out. But this one I liked because one of the things that I started thinking about is if I could do this all over again, one of the things in her book that I think is really cool, and maybe, somewhere along the way, I'll think of a way to do something maybe that's a little bit more aligned with some of the things with time management. But in her case, she basically has set this book up where everything is set by a day, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And every day of the week, there's a little piece of advice. There's a tip to apply. There's an example of how to apply it. And I just really like it that if you are somebody that is a daily writer, and I'm not a daily writer, but I try to be a week daily writer. So Monday through Friday during the course of the semester, I could see this being a really great way to open up your writing session. So if you're somebody that needs some ramp up time to get into your writing, I could see, on a Monday, getting your cup of coffee. Here's mine for today. For those of you that are audio only, I held up a cup of coffee. But, I could see this being really great to just take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, read the advice, get yourself kind of motivated to get going and then go. So if you're somebody that's very not regimented, but maybe more scheduled in how you write, that this could work for you, I think this would be really great. I tried to do it where I just read the pieces of advice as I wanted them. Like every Monday I was reading a piece of advice, and even if it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I think it would work just as well that way. But for me, if I could do it over again, this is one book that I do recommend to our faculty as a new starting point. And one other reason why I would recommend this, so for faculty developers that listen to our podcast, I know there are some of you. The other reason I would recommend this is that at many teaching-oriented institutions, scholarship often is not the top priority of our day. Like maybe we want it to be, or maybe we sort of know it should be, but if we're teaching a 4-4 load, we have 3 classes, lots of office hours, lots of grading, lots of students. This is a way to kind of focus on writing for that particular day. And even using that as maybe if you go in person to your campus, opening up that book first before you let everything else, the emails, the grades, the hitting, all the stuff hit you with work that you need to do. So I like this one a lot. It's a short read. You definitely could read each of the pages/exercises in 15 minutes or so. Another one I like, I've mentioned this one before too. This one is Jolie Jensen's Write No Matter What. It's really popular. I like this one because basically she made a table of contents with all kinds of writing problems you could potentially have. And then if you're having one of those problems, you could just go look at number 28 or number 26 and see what she says to do about it. Her advice is very short. So you could read it, read the solution in definitely less than 10 minutes, probably less than 5 in most times. And I like that she gives you very practical things to solve your problem in the moment. So if you're in the middle of writing and maybe you're struggling with a lack of motivation, or you're at a point in your writing and you don't know what to do next, you're really at an impasse, you can't make a decision or something like that. I really like this one to just have in your bag. It's pretty, kind of a slim volume. I believe it's from University of Chicago Press. But yes, if you check that one out, I think it's a really good one to just have along with you. And then when you get stuck, you can at least look and see what are some ways I might solve a problem. So that's a great one. And it's still great. I mean, I've kind of familiarized myself with most of the pages in the book, but there are times where I will go back to it and I'll read something with fresh eyes and think, oh, that is a good way to kind of solve that problem. Let me go back to that one for 1 second for Jolie Jensen's Write No Matter What. If you are a PhD supervisor, that's a wonderful resource to help your PhD students. So if they're stuck on a problem and you're not sure how to help them, you may want to check out that book and see what advice is in there, because that's another way that you could pass on some strategies that are very hands-on in the moment. The next book that I want to recommend, this is a long-time popular one, Wendy Belcher's Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks. I love this book. I've used it for years and years. I will say, for the record, I've never written a journal article in 12 weeks, but I have written one in 16 or 17 or 5, just depending on how fast I was kind of working on something. But I just like all the practical scenarios in there. I love the editing and revising suggestions. I love kind of figuring out what's wrong with your title. If your article title is kind of, it's not very exciting. It's just chock full of stuff. It doesn't even have to be writing advice for a journal article. So this is another one that I'd recommend, and it is also set up like a workbook. So if you really want to try to write a journal article in 12 weeks, you could use it as a workbook. There's templates in there. She's got some online templates. So definitely I would pick that, not just for articles, but for lots of things. Another one that I've recommended recently is Beck Evans and Chris Smith's Written. And I picked this one because this is actually about building up your skills and developing a scholarly writing habit. So I think too often with writing, we think, oh, it's binge write like all weekend long, or we write every day, but there's nothing in between. And most of the clients that we work with at Defend, Publish, and Lead, nobody is in either one of those camps. There are some people that maybe they write 3 or 4 days a week, or maybe they binge because they have to, because they have a deadline. Maybe they write Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, turn something in, don't write for 3 months, come back, write, 2 days a week, and then another day here or there. It's just more fluid than that. And I think the bigger thing, or the value in this particular book, is it's talking about ways to build a writing habit that doesn't have to be like the way we normally think of habits, like brushing your teeth, like doing that every day. It doesn't have to be in that kind of a way to have a habit. They've got all kinds of research in there, some from psychologists, some from novelists and writers. It's really just kind of a span of important, helpful tips. And I like it because it is very flexible. So for example, I know I've talked on different episodes in this podcast that semesters are different. You might have different classes, you might have different students. So a piece of advice that worked for you last year might not work for you this year. I've definitely found that to be true with me. While some things are the same, sometimes there's circumstances that just kind of they just change over the course of the semester. So I know in some semesters where I have more administrative work, I have to have different habits to acknowledge the fact that now I'm in 10 extra meetings a week. This particular book, I like that they offer just tons and tons of different habits. So you could even try different things every week or every month just to kind of fine tune and tweak your writing habits as you go. So even if you're plugging along great, I think this is a good one just to kind of look through and find some ways to kind of add more momentum. Another thing I like about this book is that they have the chapters set up in the table of contents based on what it is you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to start writing and you're having trouble in that way, there's a whole section on that. If you're having a trouble kind of having a time to stop or knowing what to do next, there's a section on that. So great book for that. It's a newer book. So if you haven't gotten that one, it's a great one to add to your collection. Another one that I like is Stylish Academic Writing by Helen Sword. This is a book, this is actually one of my favorite books on scholarly writing, because I think so much of the advice with scholarly writing books is all about getting it finished, knocking it out. I probably even just presented it in that way when I talked about making it a writing habit or finding your writing time. But one of the reasons that I found that faculty start enjoying writing more or sticking with it more beyond just saying, okay, well, I write from 1 to 2:30 every Monday afternoon or something like that, is that they sometimes will write, but the sentences sound the same way they wrote them 5 years ago. That introductory sentence sounds just like an article they wrote 5 years ago with that same kind of introductory sentence. And they kind of get in a rut. So I like Helen Sword's book a lot because there are different chapters in here that address different aspects of writing that make the writing more appealing to readers, but still are academic and scholarly in nature. So one of the things that I found after using this book is I definitely have a higher success rate of getting manuscripts past a desk editor. So they went out for review right away. And I credit that to having a little bit more of a voice in my writing that was more engaging, more interesting, that the reader, the editor was willing to send it on for a peer review. Maybe if they didn't totally like the argument that I was making, or they were a little unsure about fit with the journal, sometimes really solid, good, stylish writing can help and get you past that hump. So I liked hers because, again, set up in short chapters. You could pick one chapter a week or one thing a semester to kind of focus on working in your writing. And there's good examples in there. So it's a great one to look at. She's done lots of books on academic writing, but this one's still my favorite out of all the ones that she's done. And then I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything about what scholarly writing book I am looking at this semester. In the spring of 2024, I will be a visiting scholar in project narrative at Ohio State University. And I'm working on a project with narratives of faculty writing. And this is a new project that I'm working on. But I came across a book when I was looking at some resources to work on that project. And it was talking about a different way to think about scholarly writing. And it says here, this title is called Liberating Scholarly Writing, The Power of Personal Narrative, and it's by Robert Nash. I have not read this book, but I looked at the table of contents and I looked at some of the sample pages in there, and I can see that this is something that those of us that are in fields that allow for narrative or personal narratives, I think this might be a way to think about writing in a way that maybe makes it less, whatever the word is, formulaic, where you can have a little bit of your own unique spin, because formulas are great. I recommend all the time the Academic Phrase Bank, University of Manchester's or Manchester University's Academic Writing Phrase Bank. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I recommend that all the time. And that sets up sentences in a way that we're familiar with. When we read a scholarly article, we kind of understand those setups. But I like this book for the idea of thinking about how narrative can add these extra things. What could we do with scholarly narrative or scholarly writing and narrative? And so there's a whole argument in there about how narrative writing can be scholarly. So that part I'm particularly interested in. But as I get through more of it, I'll report back. But that is one that will be a new book for my scholarly writing. So just to kind of close out this episode, I do have people that will say, well, how often do you buy, books about scholarly writing? A lot of times I buy them right away because I'm kind of a nerd that way. Those are sometimes like Christmas presents I will ask for, or something like that. But in general, I always buy a new one a year. And I do try to buy one in August. For those of you that are at universities where you're lucky enough to have professional development funds, I am fortunate that I have some. This is something that I will use those funds for, because for me, it's important to kind of keep my scholarly writing moving, but also to keep it growing and changing and adapting to the circumstances. So in my case, I want to be ready to, work on this project with scholarly writing and narratives. And I think this will be the book to do it. But I do encourage you to think through right now what books are in your scholarly writing library. What are some things that you might need if you're a graduate student looking for a job, if you're somebody that's already in a new position, or you're somebody that hasn't written for a while and wants to come back. A lot of times these books can be entry points to get you thinking about your writing again. All of the ones that I picked, with the exception of this new one, because I have not read it, but all of the ones that I picked are accessible. They're not a difficult writing. I don't like scholarly writing support books that shame the writer or tell you something like you must write every day. I don't believe that. I know that that's not true from writers that we work with all the time at Defend, Publish, and Lead. So I want to leave you with those. And just a final note, one of the things that I think might be helpful at this point as you're thinking through scholarly writing resources is just to think about where's the area that you're having the most challenges. Is it writing the literature review portion? Are you always having trouble describing your results? There are many, many focused resources on just those things. Potentially we'll do some episodes on those different kind of subgenres of these types of books. But I think these are really good ones to start with because they cover a whole breadth of issues and you can return to them again and again. Other notes for Defend, Publish, and Lead. If you haven't checked us out lately, we do have in September our job hunting workshop. So if you're interested in joining us on Eventbrite, if you look at Eventbrite and Defend, Publish, and Lead, we have our 4-week job series workshop coming up. So those seats in that one go very quickly, but this is the one where for one registration fee, you get advice on writing CVs, cover letters, DEI statements, and more. Happy writing this week.